Okay, we do have some breaking news. President Trump says that China called U.S. trade officials overnight to say that they want to come back to the negotiating table. It's hard for us to confirm whether that is true or not. There's been a lot of differing accounts coming out of the G7, but this comes as the president is increasingly isolated on the world stage of the G Summit. So joining us now to talk about all of this, we have April Ryan, CNN political analyst and White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks, Angela Rye, CNN political commentator, the CEO of Impact Strategies and former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus, wowza, and CNN political commentator and the 2018 Democratic candidate for governor of Florida, and Bakari, CNN commentator, attorney, and a former Democratic member of the South Carolina House, and we're out of time.
But he's endorsed. Do we go to break?
We're out of time, guys.
He's endorsed Kamala Harris.
Who wrote these today? Y'all got a new intern.
All right. I mean, I barely know where to begin.
It's a lot this morning.
Okay, so let me just get your thoughts on what's been happening at the G7 and all of the news that's coming out of there.
So just to start, I mean, the fact that you all here at CNN have to begin this conversation about the president and the supposed call from China with we have yet to confirm with the Chinese whether or not that took place is in and of itself a pretty miraculous thing. It used to be the case that you could actually take the word of a president of the United States, that if they heard from a foreign government that a conversation took place, that there be some similarity about the readout from that. But this president has taken private meetings with Russians. He's gone abroad and met privately with world leaders without other ears in the room. He comes out and says one thing, they come out and say another, and we don't know where it is. This is sheer confusion. And mostly, I honestly feel that this is a sad moment in American history that the president of the United States can go abroad and still not have the confidence of the people of the country that he represents, that he's actually going to tell the truth, that he will have credibility. And what is the outcome of all of that? This kind of confusion. This has been 3 days of God knows what.
And it's causing anxiety in the world markets. You heard Anthony Scaramucci and say what you want about his politics, but he knows the investing community, and he's saying that business leaders around the world are looking at this saying, we don't know what's going on. Right. And even if the president's telling the truth about China calling and saying they want to get back to the table this morning, it still represents massive whiplash.
Of course it does.
You know, John, I don't know if you should have the IMDb page or Anthony Scaramucci, because you kept a straight face throughout that entire interview, did very well. We commended you on the break. And yes, that is a ton of shade for Anthony Scaramucci, because in this day and age, Donald Trump puts people on his transition team in his administration. They become political experts and they don't have a political resume to stand on. The fact that we are talking about breaking news this morning that may or may not be breaking news, I'd like to figure out what the definition of breaking news is, because is it breaking news if someone is lying? Like, I just have a ton of questions. And mostly for Anthony Scaramucci, like, he stands to benefit a whole lot from saying now, after putting America through this tragic presidency, that, oh, this isn't the right thing to do, but also I can't tell you if or I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. Like, I'm over the whole thing. I've been over Anthony Scaramucci since we talked about this last time. You can.
I know, but see, let me say this. So to answer your question, he has a lot to gain, but he says, you know, I've been emailing with him since 3 a.m. this morning, and I know
that's early.
I know, I don't sleep, but anyway,
what y'all emailing about?
We were emailing about this. He actually said that, you know, he's basically about a pro-America campaign, but he does stand to gain something. He is trying to create a pact against Donald Trump.
Yeah, I suppose
that's the bottom line.
That's not it.
No, but wait a minute.
Joe Walsh. Hold on one second.
Yes.
Joe Walsh, who's come forward. You know, these guys are sort of marginalized, to tell you the truth. There's an 88% approval rate from Republicans. So if you look at their Twitter feeds, they get tons of hate.
Joe Walsh is Donald Trump. Joe Walsh is. If you look at his Twitter feed,
coming out against him now, it's not like it's a total win.
But no, listen, in many ways that it is. So what some of these guys are trying to recover is their dignity. They're not acting just for this moment. They're also acting for the history. This presidency is wrong. They have enabled this presidency. Walsh, God knows, if you all just, you know, briefly scoured his Twitter feed, you see what would happen.
But let me also, Andrew brought up a good point, because as these individuals are trying to recover their quote-unquote dignity, the United States of America has to go through a phase, whoever the next president of the United States is, to recover its global standing. Yeah. So what you've seen at the G7 is devastating to our global standing. You have two G7s going on right now. you have the one going on in the president's head, and you have the actual G7 that's going on.
Well, he's more like a G1. I mean, he's pretty much
He's more like not a G. He's not a G.
That was a good one. That was a good one.
Actually is true,
G1.
but
Not a G.
when you look at the machinations of Macron behind his back and bringing in the Iranian top diplomat to come in and negotiate and try to bring these countries together, and Donald Trump is completely surprised. He's running circles around the president of the United States diplomatically, and even more telling for those of us. And this ironically is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is a science and non-science issue. This is almost a generational issue, because there are a lot of young Republicans who also believe that climate change is an existential threat.
We just have the picture right now. Let's just show the picture right now of this climate meeting.
Well
Bakari's
played.
talking about.
Well done, Bakari.
I think we have the empty chair right now. This was a meeting of the G7 to talk about climate. And there is an empty chair there. President Trump is the one leader. I didn't mean to interrupt, Bakari.
No. But I mean, the Amazon is burning. It's literally burning right now. Climate change is an existential threat. And while we are talking about how wind turbines cause cancer, when we're talking about things that are science fiction, the president of the United States is not only destroying us on the global stage, but also you have to think about your children and what he is putting our children through by not taking this climate
And also
climate
the
change
adults,
seriously.
because this fool is talking about nuking hurricanes.
That is another tidbit of news that we haven't gotten to.
but I'm saying,
That's the
like,
president's
it's
suggestion.
He's
that
joking,
maybe
right?
we can.
Like, this is a joke.
Who knows?
No,
But here are two things that I want to get back to: China and Iran. As soon as this president leaves G7 and he gets on the plane on Air Force One, he is going to have a Twitter storm against Macron with the issue of Iran. He is livid, they say. And then on China with this call, this president has pretty much been backed into a corner. People at the White House are saying, I'm getting text messages that they don't know. They didn't know anything about this call. They knew nothing about it. So they're trying to find out and vet all the information about it. But here's the thing with China. We have to be very careful. They're very strategic. A lot of those Chinese officials came to the United States and learned this country and learned through our systems and our education systems and went back, and now they know how to play the game against us. Wait a minute, hold on, wait a minute. They're very strategic. Now, what they're trying to do is they're saying, hey, well, we're going to give you some tariffs, and it's going to hit us where we hurt economically around the holidays. They know how to play this game.
Listen,
They know how to play this
They don't have to be chess players
No.
to negotiate with Donald Trump. You can be.
You can play
I
goldfish.
declare war. I mean, I go
some
fish.
spades, a good
It doesn't
spades
have
game.
to be
Not
sophisticated,
spades,
but
goldfish.
that is what all of us ought to be concerned about. Democrats, Republicans alike. I mean, this man can wake up, send out a tweet, markets can crash, futures can crash, and it shows up in our pensions and it shows up in people's
And
everyday
just very
lives.
quickly, one person who is alarmed comes from an interesting source, Boris Johnson. So Boris Johnson said this at the G7. Listen to this moment. Holding. It's going to be.
Our country is doing really well. We have horrible trade deals, and I'm straightening them out. The biggest one by far is China.
I just want to say I congratulate the president on everything that the American economy is achieving. It's fantastic to see that, but just to register the faint sheep-like note of our view on the trade war. We're in favor of trade peace on the whole.
Sure.
Down view.
In favor of trade peace with China?
Well, we think that on the whole, the UK has profited massively in the last 200 years from free trade. And that's what we want to see.
Bakari, he said, we favor dialing it down if we can. When the voice of reason comes from Boris Johnson.
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself how this unique strain of populism has just transformed the entire globe, not just here in the United States. But leaders of the free world right now, Boris Johnson and Donald Trump are having discussions whereby Boris Johnson looks to be the more fiscally sound and responsible leader on the world stage. I mean, where are we? So to the Republicans who are watching this morning, right? And I don't know why I'm on this new kick this morning, but you have to recall the days you may have disagreed with Barack Obama on substantive policies.
That's right.
However, he never embarrassed us on the world stage.
Exactly.
And when you look at Iran, just to tap on Iran today is closer to building a nuclear weapon than they were under the Iran deal when Barack Obama was president of the United States. Results matter, and this president is failing.
All right, guys, stand by. The president is denying a report in Axios this morning that says he was considering or musing or asking, I should say, about using nuclear weapons to stop hurricanes headed toward the United States of America. Back with us, April Ryan, Angela Rye, Andrew Gillum, and Bakari Sellers. Angela, I want to start with you here because you came in this morning talking about this.
Yeah, Why, John? Just honestly, like everybody on set just left. I mean, this is so ridiculous. I keep wanting you all to wake me up and tell me this was a very long, terrible, bad dream, but it's real. It's a real thing, and it's news.
Okay,
that he's
but-
nuking. He wants to
can I
nuke
just say that
hurricanes
this-
coming off the coast of Africa.
This
Bakari.
actually worked before, guys, and we do need to recognize that.
In
This
what
is-
part?
Talk
Wait,
to
wait,
us about that.
It was Sharknado. In Sharknado.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, those are his facts.
But
Those are his facts.
This is taken from Sharknado, and I do want you to know.
And you know what?
Is
The
he really
sad part
taken
is
from
it's probably
Sharknado?
it's
Well,
probably
this was an
true.
idea that was floated during the Eisenhower administration in the 1950s.
We've
where
learned a
President
lot
Trump
more.
gets a lot of his
Allegedly.
ideas about when America was sort of at its best, basically.
Yes.
Here's what Axios is
Maybe he
reporting.
read
And by the way, this, he's denying it, but this is what was recorded in the National Security Council memorandum that recorded the comments when
Which
they happened.
means that might be factually
Yeah.
based.
In, in real time.
Yeah.
Here's what Axios is reporting. During one hurricane briefing at the White House, Trump said, I got it. Why don't we nuke them? According to the source who was there. They start forming off the coast of Africa. As they move
go.
across the Atlantic,
Yeah, well, there
we
you
drop
go.
a bomb inside the eye of the hurricane and it disrupts it. Why can't we do that? This source paraphrased the president's remarks that, as we said, were recorded.
Listen, it worked in Sharknado. He wants to give it an opportunity, give it a chance. It's not science-based. This all ties into what we were talking about in the earlier segment. We have the leader of the free world who does not believe in science.
Stop calling
but-
him
but-
that.
but let-
Stop
but let
calling
me
him
say
that.
this. I know
Stop
we're
calling him
tongue-
that.
we're-
Call him something else.
We're tongue-in-cheeking this, but this is the president
funny.
of the United States saying something about that. And he brought in Africa as Angela, as we were talking during break, he's called Africa a shithole nation. It's
he's
actually a
called some of the
country, some of the
countries,
countries. Africa is a continent. And what part of Africa? Are you talking about sub-Saharan Africa where there are mostly black people? This is just crazy. There is a ripple effect that could happen for land, sea, for people if he did something like this. For this man to think this is the leader of the free world. There should be some. Well, he's the president of the United States,
supposed to be.
Angela.
He's supposed to be.
He is the
He's supposed
person
to
who
be.
anything he does and says impacts people, impacts the globe.
until we don't let it.
There needs to be someone who vets what he says because this is dangerous.
If only there were some part of the government that was full of scientists that could check this.
Yeah.
There is.
Is there?
Noah.
Yes, Noah is.
Imagine
Noah
who's
actually.
Who's Noah, Bakari?
Noah actually.
I feel
has
bad for the head of Noah.
But they have. This is something.
It's over.
This is one of these conspiracy theories or ideas that's been around for decades. So Noah actually has said things about bombing hurricanes before, and this is what it says. Apart from the fact that this might not even alter the storm, this approach neglects the problem that the released radioactive fallout would fairly quickly
you go.
move with the trade winds to affect land areas and cause devastating environmental problems.
Exactly.
Needless to
Using some
say,
radioactive
says the
fallout.
U.S.
Exactly.
government.
So a
this is not a good idea.
supersized hurricane that now has radioactive ingredients that could kill people.
We
and
haven't learned from
obliterate.
Agent Orange.
I think we've
this-
probably given this as much time.
Well,
as
we
haven't
probably
learned
have,
from Agent
except,
Orange?
except I'm going to predict this. The head of NOAA, should the White House have anything to do with who that is, may want to start looking for another job because this president will not like.
So what? But he's telling
be
the truth.
contradicted.
You should not be
They already
penalized for
started.
telling the truth.
No, I
You
agree.
should not be penalized for telling the truth.
We agree.
We're not fighting.
No, we're not fighting. We're not fighting. But I'm so upset.
I think
I'm
that
upset.
April's point is that why does Noah even have to issue a statement?
It's
That's-
I'm not sure. Was this, a
The way
statement?
you're
was this a new statement or was this something
I
about
don't know.
they
We'll
have on
find
their
out what
website?
year it is. But I guess the
Yeah.
point is that when you're anti-science, there are ludicrous things said, and then it does force the rest of the world or
Thank you,
people who are serious-minded to sort of swing into action
That's
to
right.
try to contain the damage. And we've seen that with the economy. We've seen that now with science.
Just to be clear, this is not a new statement. This is something that NOAA has available on its website
boilerplate.
in case people wonder about bombing hurricanes.
Well, they better be ready.
But the reason why, no, I'm not going to say I guess. The reason why it means so much to me is because I've covered 4 presidents. I've seen everything come to the White House from war to peace and everything between. And they have been very serious. They've done the best that they know how to do as president. This president is taking it like it's a joke. People
No, I
are.
think this is truth. I think this is him being serious. I hate to break it to you, but I think this is him being serious.
Oh God,
Look
I
at his
need your
tweets.
shoulder to lie
Should we
on.
move on to what the 2020 Democrats are suggesting
They're
as
better than this.
alternatives?
I know they're not suggesting any nuclear.
No. I mean
intervention
just
hurricanes.
in terms of the whole panoply of the things that they're suggesting. Because last night we had some CNN town halls with Governor Steve Bullock as well as Mayor Bill de Blasio, both running for president. And so, of course, the issue of health care, which is so hotly debated, came up. So here is a moment with Governor Bullock.
The greatest stride that we made since Medicaid and Medicare was Obamacare. I want to build on that, not start all over. And I think you could do that with a public option. I don't want to take away 165 million people that have employer-sponsored health care.
We're saying very simply, because we have these wonderful public hospitals and clinics, we're saying there should not be such a thing as a family that can't go to the doctor. We're giving people a health care card. We're saying we're going to assign you a primary care doctor, a family doctor in one of our public hospitals or clinics, so you actually have some place to turn from the very beginning and get the care you need.
And Bakari, herein lies the challenge for Democrats. While we're talking about Sharknado and the president is issuing various edicts heretofore, forthwith, these, I mean, so many people on the Democratic side are dealing with real policy, which is frankly a little drier than Sharknado.
Sure.
And this is what they have to contend with for the next
Literally
14
drier.
months of
So
this conflict.
this is both the challenge and for all of us at the table somewhat hopeful in the same sense, because you have Mayor Bill de Blasio and Steve Bullock, and although neither one of them probably will make it to the Final Four, I don't even know if either one of them will make it to Iowa, they're having a substantive debate about how to provide more health care to individuals in this country, period. I mean, whether or not you agree with how they want to do it, they're having a substantive debate. We are not going to have a substantive debate during the race for President of the United States. Donald Trump is going to be on one side of the stage with a bat of identity politics, as Chris Cuomo always says. And he's going to be ready to bludgeon you with that. And yes, it's not going to be about who has the best policy. And that is what Democrats are going to have to deal with. And what we have to be cautious to do is not necessarily breathe life into the things that tear our country apart. And that is, this ties into the Joe Walshes of the world and the Scaramucci's and all of those other things, because we need to have a great conversation about how to bring our country together, and whether or not that's Donald Trump or not, whereby he wants to tear the country apart. Narrator says that's not.
Yeah.
All right, friends. Again,
Narrators.
you'll be back in a little. Breaking this morning, the president seems to have been spending the morning backing off the trade war with China. He claims China called twice overnight, offering a conciliatory message and to schedule new talks in a few weeks. Well, those talks were already scheduled, and there's currently no proof those calls actually took place. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin would only vaguely define them as discussions. Whatever the case may be about the accuracy of the story, there is little question now that the president is trying to clean up after the huge upheavals in the world markets, responding to the president accelerating, then decelerating, then accelerating the trade war over the weekend. As of now, U.S. markets, they're up after dropping more than 600 points on Friday.
So on Sunday, President Trump conceded he's having second thoughts about imposing a new round of tariffs on China. Then hours later, White House aides had to try to explain that and walk that message back. And then there's the attention-grabbing announcement that President Trump just made a little time ago that he will possibly host next year's G7 at his Doral Golf Resort outside of Miami, which has all sorts of ethical implications. So joining us now, we have April Ryan, CNN political analyst and White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks, Angela Rye, CNN political commentator and former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus, Bakari, CNN commentator and a former Democratic member of the South Carolina House, and Andrew Gillum, CNN political commentator and the 2018 Democratic candidate for governor of Florida. We've really cut down on your credentials.
Yeah, exactly.
Got a new writer.
Three titles back.
A Wikipedia
really
page.
Great. So, Bakari, I wish that we could report on what's come out of the G7. I mean, frankly, I just, in all honesty, it's hard to know what news was made because there have been so many conflicting reports from what the president has said versus his allies versus the White House aides.
Well, I think that we have I know that we have a president who runs a trust deficit, and we're starting to see, I think the world is starting to see what we saw in the campaign when he came down the escalator. There are a lot of us who've been preaching and singing from this same, sheet of music for a very, very long period of time, back from the 90s and the Central Park Five, back from his father, and, all of these things come full circle. And so now the world is seeing what we've been seeing for a long period of time. One point that I did want to harp on that you brought up about actually having the G7 in Doral is that we forget, if you go back in history not too long ago, Jimmy Carter had a special counsel investigate his peanut farm. A special counsel launched a full investigation into his peanut farm that he was then compelled to sell. Jimmy Carter, the president of the United States, had to sell his peanut farm, but Donald Trump is ripping the United States.
So why is that? Why isn't a special counsel investigating Donald Trump's businesses right now?
I don't know. You got to ask the United States. You got to ask a whole bunch of other people. The Attorney General, Bill Barr ain't investigated nothing that has to get close to the Republican Party. But even more importantly, we should be concerned as Americans that Donald Trump is ripping us apart at the seams for profit.
Yep.
Now, let's not forget that that everything he does is profit-driven and racist. So he's ripping us apart at the seams for profit. That is even more devastating.
Bakari, I would almost even ask, this tirade of tweets, statements about tariffs, no tariffs, starting with Mexico, now we're obviously in China. I want to know, and somebody ought to do the investigative work, who's making the money here? We already know that the president's tweets can cause markets to either rise or collapse, to destabilize or not to destabilize. And then one other point from the piece that John Avalon just did. This is a president in a Republican Party who has made socialism the brand name for every Democrat running for president and any Democrat in the country who is running. Now, for the Fox viewers out there, a true form of socialism is the government owns and operates everything to include private sector business. You now have a president who is attempting to constrain U.S. companies and telling them who they can and cannot do business with. If that isn't more socialist, I'm not really sure what would be. This is a man who throws names and lobs insults at one hand, and on the other is inconsistent, can't be trusted with his word, and quite frankly, flip-flops every tweet.
And there are American companies that we know, brand names, that we know that could be affected by this. One is Walmart. I remember going to China maybe 2 years before the Beijing Olympics. Walmart was the first company in China that had a union. And guess who oversaw the union? The government, the Chinese government. Those kind of companies are affected, not just small companies, but major companies. But going back to this other thing about Doral, let's think about number one, September 9th, when Congress goes back in session. I can see Elijah Cummings, head of Oversight and Government Reform, looking into this. This goes back into emoluments. This goes back into conflicts of interest. Then let's talk about taxpayer dollars. This will be the world converging at his place in Florida. But think about this. Taxpayer dollars will be used to supply Secret Service. When you have this kind of movement of world leaders, you have to construct barriers. You have to do so much. It is costly. And then at a time where there is issues of heightened security, national security, this is not only going to cost us, but the president is going to make money off of this at his facility that you have said it's bankrupt.
Hang on one second. Just one update on where we are right now, Angela. I think we have some live pictures from inside a working lunch at the G7. Can we put those pictures up there? All right, it's tape playback. We have some video of it. We can at least put that up. Of this working lunch, and I'm told, at least as of a few moments ago, President Trump wasn't inside, nor has there been an actual meal served there.
But Macron is hosting it, and I suppose everyone was expected to be at this working meeting, but we don't know why President Trump isn't there.
He's at recess.
Well, Angela, look, he may show up any second, he may be there already, but how would you assess the reception he has received over the last few days? So many of the articles, Peter Baker's got a great one in the New York Times, basically saying he's in his own summit while everyone else is also holding meetings.
Yeah, and that's why I said he's, on recess. When you think about Donald Trump and how he behaves, it's just like a school child, especially the ones that never learn how to play with anyone else in the sandbox.
No offense to school children.
Yes,
or sandboxes.
So
or sandboxes.
True, but offense to Donald Trump. And I think the reality of this is, I think about, Bakari, some of the things that you were just raising about Donald Trump's history. The fact is, it should be no surprise to any of us that he has again again played on some of Americans' worst fears, whether that is Mexicans taking people's jobs or it's the Chinese and them being a dominant world power and our stiffest competition. There's no room for global cooperation in his mind, and I think that's a big disservice to our country. It's no surprise also that you said he might be at the working lunch now. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he didn't.
But you know what I got to tell you, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump. Didn't vote for him, obviously, and I'm working hard in Florida to see him not reelected. But that being aside, when he is on the world stage, he's representing all of us. He's representing the United States of America, and that means Democrats, Republicans, Independents, those who don't vote whatsoever. Not showing up at a working lunch is an embarrassment. Yeah. Popping off one day about not knowing about the Iranian finance and state ministers coming to the G7 and then flipping the next day. Going into the G7 and attempting to reward Russia, a country who we know, based off of all of our intelligence here in America, intruded upon the U.S. elections.
Want to do it again.
And are working to do it again. This is embarrassment after embarrassment after embarrassment, and it has to raise the question, who exactly is this president working for?
Hold on, this just in. Our pool reporter tells us that President Trump has just arrived at that working lunch.
Welcome.
He was running late.
Welcome.
Let's talk about what the alternative is. For voters out there, Republican or Democrat, who are tired of some of this and want an alternative for 2020, there are alternatives popping up, and one of them was just on our program. And Angela, I want to talk to you about this because this is former Congressman Joe Walsh, okay?
One-term Congressman Joe Walsh.
One-term Congressman Joe Walsh, now a conservative talk radio host. And he has said that he regrets his incendiary language, which he specialized in for many, many years, and that he's no longer a bomb thrower, and that he said on our air he will no longer engage in personal attacks. And I'm just wondering, because he engaged in one with you publicly on Twitter, are people capable of redemption?
Sure.
Should we allow them, when they come out on the public stage like this and say that they regret it, should we allow them redemption, or are some people too far gone?
I think that everyone can be redeemed. That doesn't mean that they need to be president, nor does it mean that they need to run for any public office, nor does it mean they should hold a radio show, nor does it mean they should have a Twitter account, nor does it mean they should have an internship, nor does it, I mean, like, I don't care how he has redeemed himself. I don't think that he deserves to have a microphone, an opportunity to speak on this network or any others. He is not just inflammatory. He knows that he twists people's words and benefited from it, from whatever little thing he got from the retweet moment. I hope it was worth it. And at the end of the day, he has to sleep with the consciousness of having supported someone who he is identical to, if you look at the public record of everything he's ever said on social media, and no distinction at all. What is he going to do different? He's not bright. He's not going to do anything dynamic we don't have to say it as the president. He's not going to get there. So, like, congratulations, you scored an interview on New Day. Next.
So, all right. Well, I was following up. It was in my head until great segue there, Angela. No, but one of the things that Donald Trump is causing people to go into a sense of mania. Like, there is no reason for any Democrat out there to uplift Joe Walsh. There's no reason for any Never Trump or anybody who wants to beat Donald Trump. There's no weakening that Joe Walsh is going to do to Donald Trump.
No impact at all.
No, this whole theory that Scaramucci has that, oh my God, we're going to have all of this collection of misfits that come together and they're going to weaken Donald Trump. They're not.
Because, like, who are you actually? Like, who are you?
But they don't actually say, just to be clear, they don't actually say it's a collection of misfits. Both of them say that they have heard from people inside the White House and inside Congress that there is a groundswell of this feeling that they're not alone. They believe they are the spokespeople for this groundswell. So it's not misfits. They believe it's like elected officials.
There's definitely a
groundswell. But if there is, I would prefer you not trot out Joe Walsh as your captain.
But here's the problem. I've said this before. As America we are now bullied into submission, and anything in some minds is better than Donald Trump. But they are now at the point where anything similar still is better than what Donald Trump is. And that's crazy. This man has talked about Stevie Wonder taking the knee. This man has talked about Barack Obama being a Muslim. We've forgotten about Pastor Jeremiah Wright, right? Remember that? He just equated on this show Native American skin.
Redskin. He was saying the word Redskins. He was defending a previous tweet that had been
There's no
incendiary
defense
about
for that.
Redskins.
But like, why
It's
can't? but see,
racial,
my only
it's
point-
racist,
my
it's
only-
ugly.
My only point is, for me personally, I can't speak for anybody else in this quartet of brilliant minds. Well, there's 6 of us now, so.
Thank you.
I didn't mean to leave you all out.
Very much.
Blame that on the lack of cappuccino, John, because it's really, yeah. Anyway, limousine liberals. But what I will say is, for a lot of us, this race is not just about beating Donald Trump. And I think people forget.
No, it's not.
It's about much more than that. See, I want to beat Donald Trump and everything he stands for.
Right.
And for me, Joe Walsh is a part of that everything he stands for. Without Donald Trump, I'm not sure Joe Walsh and all of these individuals then have a mascot that emboldens them to go out and parade their xenophobic values.
Can you say one thing, Mayor? Just historically, Pat Buchanan in '92 softened George H.W. Bush. Ted Kennedy in 1980 softened Jimmy Carter. Ronald Reagan softened Gerald Ford. So if you look back historically, some people point and say, hey, if a president does get primaried, it can weaken him. You don't see that?
No, I don't see that. And just so that viewers know that I certainly don't believe, and I think my colleagues would agree, that there is no road to redemption. What I haven't heard from Mr. Walsh, like, how did he come to terms with his vitriol? What process has he gone through? Was it just, I mean, his actions, of course, but was it, as I've heard him say, watching Donald Trump illuminated to him the ugliness that was in himself? I don't buy it.
Why isn't that possible?
Because
why wasn't that a mirror for himself?
Because he stood with that same hatefulness. In fact, some might argue helped to give birth to it. He preceded.
He argues that.
This president.
He argues that
he should,
himself.
and now I want to see him do the work. And doing the work doesn't mean running for president of the United States. I want him to have some courageous conversations that actually illuminate that there's been a growth period rather than what I am concluding to be a very self-motivated act. And I consider the same to be true for Scaramucci.
And we're going to have this discussion on religion later, but I will quote the book of James because it says faith without works is dead. So before you come up here and want me to have faith that all of a sudden you are a changed man as we're talking about redemption, then we have to see what work you put into it.
But maybe he is changing. I mean, I want to believe. I mean, George Wallace was one of the. No, I want to believe. No, I want to believe he's. I believe in redemption.
I believe in redemption too.
But also show me. I'm from the show me state, even though I'm from Maryland. But show me. You know, the bottom.
The other end.
Doesn't work like that.
But neither does this argument.
But remember, George Wallace apologized towards the end of his life. I believe that people know that they're doing wrong and they know it's wrong just to galvanize people. But at the same time, they're hurting people. I believe you're right. He needs to do the work. He doesn't need to run for president. We don't need this person has got to be a moral leader.
I don't believe in redemption.
Okay,
because
well,
for me,
now you don't.
I have to regroup because I don't believe that George Wallace could be redeemed. He hurt too many people.
Give us the bottom line.
When John brought up Pat Buchanan, you were going to talk about how folks could be racist and insert themselves in presidential elections. But I think our reality is simple. Joe Walsh is not different than Donald Trump, is not different from Anthony Scaramucci. And so congratulations, all of you all are narcissists, and you've had your platform and your moment. Enjoy it, this short moment of fame. Enjoy it.
I'm not
all right, All Stars, on that note, thank you all very much.
I'm confused about redemption this morning.
No, you can be redeemed, but don't run for president.
Fair enough.
Be redeemed.
All right, moving on.